New census data has been released, and it shows that many blue states are actually set to lose a congressional seat. So let this be a very big correction on a segment I did a few days ago. The original story was from the Center for Immigration Studies, which actually said the 2020 census could show California gaining a House seat and many red states losing seats. But it looks like the actual census data from 2019 proves that I was wrong. The story is now circulating as of the other day, and it shows, this is a pretty big story. It looks like census data is showing that many blue states are going to lose a seat. Texas could gain 3. But it's not just about the census today. I've got numerous stories talking about how Illinois, California, and New York are losing residents, with New York losing the most residents. There's a lot of reasons I think this is the case, but it ultimately shows that there's going to be a major change in the census. This bodes very, very poorly for Democrats, as many people are expecting Trump to sweep in 2020. We heard the warning from Tulsi Gabbard about impeachment, that impeachment is riling up Trump's base, and they're going to go out and vote in force. And these 31 Trump districts, now 30 because Jeff Van Drew switched, are likely going to lose to Republicans. Republicans will take these seats back, creating another Republican majority in basically every branch of government. Add that to the fact that some of the biggest blue states are losing residents and losing congressional seats. I gotta say, it sounds like really, really bad news for the Democrats. So let's get started and read the story from Real Clear Politics. The 2019 census estimates foreshadow House seats and losses. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's a PayPal option, a crypto option, a physical address, but of course, the best thing you can do, share this video. YouTube has implemented some pretty harsh algorithmic changes, which basically spell the end of my channel and many others. Even people like David Pakman, a progressive. I can't tell you what the factor is. I think it has to do with the fact we talk about electoral politics, but they are removing recommendations to our channels and pushing recommendations from our channels to mainstream media. There's only one real way to overcome this, and it's sharing the video. So maybe we'll break some echo chambers while we're at it. Let's read the story from Real Clear Politics. RCP reports, the Census Bureau released its final intercensal estimates of United States population on Monday. These are figures released every year to track the flow of population in the United States and to give an idea of what to expect in the decennial count. They are important because the 2020 census will determine the next congressional reapportionment. By looking at the estimates, we can get a sense of how things are likely to turn out the following year. To estimate the actual census outcome, some back-of-the-envelope calculation is in order. I took the estimated changes in population in every state from 2017 to 2018, and then again from 2018 to 19. I created a weighted average by counting the 2018 and 19 changes twice and the 2017 to 2018 changes once. I then assumed this would be the amount by which the state populations would grow or shrink come the official count 2020. Using the current apportionment formula, known as the method of equal proportions, we can estimate the following changes. Texas should gain 3 seats. Florida should gain 2. North Carolina, Colorado, Arizona, Montana, and Oregon should each gain 1 seat. Alabama, California, Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, and Rhode Island should each lose a seat. Now, I'll point out, it's not just blue states losing seats. Red states will be losing some, but it looks like Texas and Florida, though Florida is a swing state, we're going to see some swing state gains and Texas making some gains. Now, I think it's important to point out, based on Trump's base and the expectations for next year, these are going to be red states. Okay, I don't know what that will mean for the individual congressional districts, because just because the majority of the state might vote in a certain direction doesn't mean there's not going to be districts that are overwhelmingly blue. There's also gerrymandering to consider. I hope you take all that into consideration, and I will go through the other story to kind of break down the differences between what they're saying. RCP goes on. Of course, it is difficult to know exactly how this would play out in redistricting. Obviously, the West Virginia and Rhode Island seats would have to be taken out of the Republican and Democratic columns, respectively, barring a major surprise next year. It is difficult to eliminate an additional Democratic seat from Ohio, though not impossible, while drawing an additional Democratic seat in Oregon is unlikely, though not impossible. In the Electoral College, President Trump would gain electoral votes, but these changes would not take effect until the 2024 election. Trump could theoretically run if he loses in 2020. Or we might see Trump Jr. run. So keep that in mind. This won't take effect until 2024. These are, however, just estimates, and we have been surprised in the past. The most vulnerable seats are in increasingly order of vulnerability: Illinois 17th, Florida's 29th, Montana 2nd, New York's 26th, The next seat subtracted should the actual count for some of the previous seats fall short of the estimates are in order. Alabama 7th, Minnesota's 8th, Ohio 16th, California's 53rd, and Rhode Island 2nd. I want to read from you a comment about Rhode Island. I'm not trying to make it seem like this is overtly just going to be bad for Democrats, although it seems to lean in that direction because it looks like, as they said, Trump would gain electoral votes. Let's not say Trump, okay? Let's say the Republicans are likely going to gain electoral votes. Trump won't lose in 2020. I mean, maybe he will, assuming he does. He could run in 2024. But if the same base exists for Donald Trump Jr. and he does end up running, because there's murmuring, okay? There's speculation. I hate speculation, but people are saying, we got AOC on one side, she'll just barely be old enough, and Donald Trump Jr. on the other side. If these would be gains for Trump, they would be gains for Trump Jr., but let's be real. There'll be gains for any real Republican, regardless if it's Trump or not. But this is what we saw the other day. Now, I think it's fair to point out this will be a technical correction. RCP is offering up an estimate. Take it all with a grain of salt, man. I'm doing my best. I don't know if this is all definitive. Again, RCP is giving estimates. The Center for Immigration Studies is saying based on apportionment of seats in the House of Representatives in 2020, we would see the Republicans actually losing seats. Take the estimate for what it is. I know some people have said that my assessment was incorrect in the last video. I got to be honest, I'm just commenting on the data as it's presented to me. So it's important to point out these changes don't take place for a long time. Maybe I got that one wrong, and I apologize if I do. So just consider it a correction across the board. I'll read for you the first part of this, and then I want to talk to you about some of the biggest blue states losing residents. They say, under current policy, all the persons, not just citizens, are included in the population count when apportioning seats to the states in the U.S. House of Representatives and for votes in the Electoral College, which is based on House seats. Although we focus on the next census in 2020, the impact of immigration has been building for decades, as the number of people settling in the country has increased dramatically. This report examines the cumulative impact of immigration, both legal and illegal, on the apportionment of House seats. This is not an analysis of the impact of immigration only since the previous census. Apportionment is a zero-sum system. By adding more population to some states rather than others, immigration will continue to significantly redistribute political power in Washington. They say, the 2020 census will show that the presence of all immigrants and their U.S.-born children is responsible for a shift of 26 seats. Now, many of these seats swing in favor of the left because they will be going to blue states. I do believe I now have information to suggest this may be wrong. Now, listen, here's what I do. I use a third-party fact-checking organization called NewsGuard. You may have heard me talk about it all the time. They give the Center for Immigration Studies basically green check marks across the board, except for who discloses their funding. But they regularly clarify errors. They do not publish false information. I can only assume their assessment is correct, even if it's just an op-ed. That's what I'm basing this off of. I'm just saying this as a disclaimer because you really do got to fact check this stuff. I know it's my job to do so as well. I'm doing my best. I'm just saying, watch other channels, listen to other voices. I believe there's a Nuance Bro had a counter to a video I made. If you didn't see it, check it out. And I absolutely concede if I got things wrong. See what he has to say because, again, I am not perfect. But I do want to stress, they mentioned that illegal immigrants alone will only redistribute 3 seats, with Ohio, Alabama, and Minnesota each having 1 fewer seat than they otherwise would have had. California, New York, and Texas would have 1 additional seat. While Texas is technically still a red state, many people believe it is in play for 2020, 24, etc. California and New York, solid blue. This is specifically about immigration affecting the census, but it looks like RCP is doing an estimate on current census data, and if you want to take their word for it, it looks like bad news for Democrats. Now, let's move on to, well, the actual news, which lends itself to a more, I guess it's fair to say, upon reading the Center for Immigration Studies, the point I was trying to make, not so much about whether Republicans are going to lose out, but that was how I titled it, so I'll take full responsibility for that one. What I was really trying to get at is that people don't realize if illegal immigrants come to the United States and settle in a state, they will be counted in the census, and that will give congressional seats and electoral college votes to that state. The point I was really trying to drive home is that you can convert non-citizens into votes for the president. It's one of the pitfalls of the electoral college system. I still think the EC is the right way to go. But if Democrats on the left want to get rid of the electoral college, they would actually lose power because these people can't vote. So I'll make that point one more time. If you are not a citizen, but you are living in the country, they do count you for the census. And based on that individual, they will say, we need more congressional seats in this location. congressional seats result in electoral college votes. You see how that works. Check out this story, and we're going to hit New York and Illinois next. California population growth slowest since 1900 as residents leave and immigration decelerates. This is from December 21st. LA Times reports. The Golden State remains stuck in the slow lane when it comes to population. The number of Californians increased to 39.96 million, with new data from the Department of Finance showing mostly downward trends. They are rooted in fewer births, coupled with increased deaths, and among an aging population. The Golden State, however, has also seen changes in international migration, along with more and more residents leaving the state. The estimates, which indicate that California's population grew by 141,300 people between July 1st, 2018 and July 1st, 2019, nonetheless, signal 0.35 growth rate, down from 0.57 for the prior 12 months, the lowest recorded growth rate since 1900, department officials underscored. According to the agency, natural increase accounted for an additional 180,800 people to the state. Still, these gains were offset by losses in net migration, that is, the total amount of people moving into the state minus the total amount of people moving out. Notably, said Eddie Hunsinger, a demographer with the Department of Finance, even though the net international migration added to the state's population, there was substantial negative domestic net migration, which resulted in a loss of 39,500 residents. This, said the department, marks the first time since the 2010 census that California has had more people leaving the state than moving in from abroad or other states. So I think it's fair to point out natural population growth is adding to the state, and that may, then end up giving them congressional seats. I don't think it's if you're 18 or not you get counted. I think they count minors as well. So this is what we're seeing. California is still growing ever so slightly, but as they mentioned in the other articles, the way they apportion House seats is a zero-sum system. If California grows by 0.35%, say they add 140,000 people, but another state adds 300,000 people, then it stands to reason they'll have to move a congressional seat to the faster growing state. The article from the LA Times actually does bring up their fears over the 2020 census. They say, phrase that the decline in growth could have implications during the 2020 census count and the ensuing apportionment that is based on census figures. It's something to be concerned about, he said. California could be on the cusp of losing a seat if it doesn't show up with a decent count. In an email to the Times, demographer Hunsinger countered, the estimates are for current and historical information rather than the future. That's a really serious point. I want to make sure I highlight as we go through this, because I know there's going to be 1,000,001 people piling on saying, oh, you're wrong for this, that, and reason, and this, that, and this reason. I'm doing the best I can, as I stated, but let's move on. Check this out from Gothamist. New York is losing New Yorkers. They're not just losing New Yorkers. They're losing them at an alarming rate, and they're losing residents more than any other location. They say, New York has lost the most residents in the country in 2019, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. There was an estimated 76,790 fewer New Yorkers in the state this past year, a drop of 0.4%, which made it the biggest percentage decrease in the country. The major factor in it was net domestic migration. New York lost 180,649 residents who left our fair state for another area of the country. Only California outdid us, with 203,414 residents moving away in 2019. New York State, another major blue state, is losing a ton of residents, and mostly in these cities. So I do want to point out, as we move into some other states, I'll read a little bit more, but I want to point out the presumed effect when these people start moving out. They say the rest of the tri-state region also lost residents. Connecticut may have had only 6,233 fewer residents, but that loss was enough to drop the state population by 0.2%. New Jersey lost 3,835, a decline that did not change the Garden State's population by a significant amount. But 48,946 residents moved out of state, landing New Jersey in fourth place of states that lost residents to net domestic migration. These are people leaving the state. The census is going to redraw districts, and it stands to reason my assessment was entirely incorrect, but I do want to point one thing out as we move on to the next few stories. I'll come back to this story in a second. I want to do Illinois first. Actually, let's just read about Illinois. Let's just get right to it. The Chicago Tribune reported just a couple days ago, Illinois loses population for sixth straight year, and it lost more residents than any state this decade. Wow. I don't know who's winning, New York or Illinois. The Tribune reports, Illinois' population decreased in 2019 by an estimated 51,250 people, or 0.4%, marking the 6th consecutive year the state has lost residents, according to new data from the U.S. Census Bureau. Since the turn of the state, Illinois has lost more residents than any other state, with a drop of about 159,700 people, or 1.2% of its population. We just heard it was New York. You see, I'm highlighting this on purpose because, look, we got conflicting information from verified sources. I'm doing my best. Only 3 other states have shrunk since 2010: Connecticut, Vermont, and West Virginia, with West Virginia losing the largest share of its residents, a 3.3% decline. So perhaps they're looking at losing residents over a longer period of time, but they seem to be missing out New York. They say Puerto Rico, a U.S. territory, lost an estimated 532,463 people since 2010, or 14.3% of its population. Population losses in Illinois have been compounding since 2014, when the state began a steady, though not precipitous, decline. Illinois is the 6th most populous state in the nation after California, Texas, Florida, New York, and Pennsylvania, which passed Illinois in 2017. Ohio is the 7th, followed by Georgia and North Carolina. As Illinois, I'm from there, I shouldn't have done that. Illinois' population has eroded. Okay, it was a possessive, sorry. Potentially weakening its political and economic power. The trend has become a frequent topic of political discussion. So everybody's talking about it. As these states lose population, they're all highlighting they're scared they're going to be losing political power in Washington. I now want to point out this first, and the ramifications and the reason why this may be happening. The New York Post says, New York residents fleeing to sunny Florida and New Jersey. Well, New Jersey's a blue state, Florida's a swing state. If blue voters, Democrat voters, move to Florida, and Florida's a swing state, that could tip the scales and result in Florida becoming solidly blue for quite some time. New Jersey's already blue, but as we saw from other data, it looks like the tri-state area is already losing out. So I can't tell you exactly, what to expect necessarily, but it's been widely reported, even in the past few days, that this could result in blue states losing out. So if we go back to RCP, it looks like the Republicans will make some gains based on the current electoral maps. But now let's talk about what happens when someone leaves a city. First, there have been a lot of people talking about how Colorado, Arizona, and other places have been absorbing California refugees, figurative refugees. These are people who bring progressive values into these red states and then turn them blue. That actually could help in the Electoral College in the long run. Even if California loses a seat, if these blue voters take over certain counties in the state and flip that state, which is winner take all, towards the Democratic voter, then California and some other blue state, some other former red state will now give their electoral votes to the Democrat. Based on what we're seeing about electoral gains, though, it seems like RCP and the Republicans will make those gains. So here's what I expect will happen. Let's say 1,000 people leave New York City. They don't all go to the same place. They spread out around the country. If rural areas are overwhelmingly Republican, then adding about 1,000 or so Democrats won't change the winner-take-all model of many of these counties. Meaning, as the Democrats leave their Democrat strongholds, they actually completely lose their political power because they're entering places dominated by Republicans. So it sounds to me, Republicans have a bright future, actually. I think what we're seeing with the fight between the Democrats, the far left, the moderate corporate centrist types, people like me, clearly being excised from the Democratic Party, shows that they're already struggling as it is. And they can't afford to lose voters who say, they say this, they say vote blue no matter who. But if those people are voting blue and they've moved to a rural area, it won't matter because the rural area is overwhelmingly going to support Trump for a lot of reasons. I've thought about why this is. Why it is that so many people are leaving these places, and I can't tell you definitively, but I have a hypothesis. The internet. The internet has decentralized how the economy works. It's also decentralized how we can purchase goods. If you lived in a rural area before, you had to drive into the city to go and purchase things. Now Amazon delivers like almost everywhere. And we're seeing small towns start to light back up because of Trump and his policies bringing back manufacturing jobs. That's not perfect. There's been some coal mining increase, some manufacturing increases. But in the end, I think what we end up seeing, rural areas are becoming stronger. Cities are weakening. They're losing residents. Now, I'll tell you about California. California's become a nightmare. They've been dominated not by a progressive elite, sort of. Hear me out. The conservatives like to say that California is this progressive, bastion, and all of its failures are the fault of liberal policies. That's not the case. Okay? It's technically the truth. It's partly true. You look at Los Angeles, a Democratic supermajority, yet they have a massive homeless problem. Why? Because they refuse to actually implement these solutions over the NIMBY mentality. The wealthy people in LA are pretending to be leftist and progressive for brownie points, likely on the internet or among their social circle. So when it comes time to actually vote, hey, we can set up housing here. They go, not in my backyard, because you build that shelter near my property value goes down. Not going to happen. So what ends up happening is filth, homeless cities, and a general homeless crisis, as well as, man, I don't even want to get into what's going on in San Francisco, especially right now, because YouTube will yell at me if I tell you the disaster that is San Francisco. But they've got homeless camps across the board. They can't solve the problem. California, what it really is, it's the capital of greed. It's people who want money. They want power, and they'll say whatever they need to say to get it. So they pander to the emotional play. They pretend to be the left, and they implement certain policies that, yes, there are many left-wing policies that fail. That's true. Overwhelmingly, the state is progressive. They have a majority in so many places, so yes, that does play a role. But let's be real. The people who are voting them in aren't doing it because they actually care about this stuff. They're doing it so they look good among their friends, and they can pretend. They're celebrities. Their whole lives are built around pretending so that to be something, to sell a product. They pretend their lives are glamorous. That's what the state is all about. So what will happen come 2020, 2024? Man, I honestly don't know. I'm just reading you a few articles, but I will give a shout out to Nuance Bro one more time. If I was wrong, I apologize. Definitely check out his rebuttal over on his channel. Do a search for Nuance Bro. I think apparently I was wrong on a bunch of things, or I misread stuff, and it happens, man. I try my best, and if I have a correction, I'll definitely point it out. And if someone, if I see somebody, correcting me on some issues, I got to be honest, I didn't see his video because I've been working relentlessly. But I will definitely get a shout out. Nuance Bro actually does pretty good content, so hopefully you guys can see if and what I got wrong, and take whatever he says into account with all of this information as well. It may be we're seeing the end of the Democratic Party because they're going to lose their ability to actually win a majority in any branch of the government. And it could be due to the far left fighting with the corporate out of touch, air quote centrist types. I don't know. But the economy is doing well and Americans love it. And Donald Trump is getting the credit for it. And as much as the Democrats want to screech and cry about it, there was a poll I showed the other day. 80% of people polled said they expected their lives to get better in this new year. And they're saying it's because of the economy, and that's Trump. These people who I told you about, they're greedy and they want money. They're going to look over their shoulder, make sure nobody's looking, and they're going to vote for Trump. I seriously think so. And if the Democrats don't course correct, there won't be Democrats to win. But I'll say this. Although it might be hyperbolic to say the Democrats are gone forever, here's what I think might happen. They're going to realize the far left play failed. The far left will be ostracized. The mainstream corporate moderate and populist types will start taking over, not the intersectional types. They'll be championing Trump's economic plan while calling out his foreign policy and his demeanor, and that will create a stronger coalition for Democrats. But for the time being, man, Republicans have it. And as long as these blue districts keep, losing residents, I think it's another sign that Democrats are in serious trouble. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 6 p.m. YouTube.com/TimCastNews. I hope. We'll see what happens. I'm filming actually very, very early because I have to be on a flight. But thanks for hanging out. And I will see you all in the next segment.